We'd like to remind you, even during this time of year, that we do have some days that are very, very sunny. And when that happens, you have at your home a lot of things, and probably in the office and automobile too, that you'd like to protect from the damaging UV rays that come from the sun. So we've been recommending that you give the folks a call or check them out online at Tint Lady. They'll do a free estimate on doing window tints. You can call and schedule an appointment today. The number is 736-8469, or go online at tintladyidaho.com. Locally owned and operated, more than 20 years in the business. 1887 Highland Avenue East in Twin Falls. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., opening, in fact, in just a few minutes. Saturday by appointment only, closed on Sundays. And remember, don't squint. Get tint. If you'd like to reach our show today, telephone number is 736-0300, 736-0300. Also, you can reach us by email. Us, I say. I'm the only person in the room. Bill.Colley at townsquaremedia.com. That's Bill.Colley at townsquaremedia.com. And you're listening to News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. You're on the air.
Morning, Bill.
Morning.
In 1996, I was driving north of Shoshone. There was a massive power outage all over Idaho, and all the radio stations went off. It was quite a while before an AM station come back on with a generator. Nobody knew what was going on. A lot of panic. I was 30 minutes from Haley, got to Haley, thought I'd pick up some gas. There was no gas. There was the credit card machines weren't working, and it was total panic within 1 hour. Two ladies were fighting over the last bag of ice in the store within 1 hour.
Now, some men might actually like to watch that, but go ahead. Don't mean to interrupt.
It was just incredible. It wasn't 3 days before the stores were trying to be empty, but there was no power. You couldn't pay for anything, unless you had cash in your pocket. Rumors were flying, America was under attack and stuff. And I'll tell you, nowadays, if the computers went down and the cell phones went down, even the nicest people would become animals, I'm afraid.
Well, yeah, it's a desperation that does set in, and people are programmed, I think, ultimately to look out for number one or their own, and they have been doing that ever since the first people walked this planet. And I think that we have to understand we're not really all the things that we consider what civilization is, how thin that line really happens to be.
Yes, it's quite concerning, and with the entitlement thing going on, especially there's a certain generation now that they think they want it and they don't want to work for it. They're going to get it somehow, and things could get really ugly because a lot of people have guns nowadays.
Yes, they do. That's called self-defense. I thank you very, very much for the telephone call, sir. This is the video that I've been talking about. I'm not going to play it for you because it's somewhat long. The original, in fact, there have been several that were follow-ups with it. It's called The Madness of a Lost Society. So if you have access to a computer and you go to YouTube, now this original video is 5 years old. It centers on what happened on Black Friday and people's behaviors. You got all these trinkets that are made by slave laborers in Asia that are being sold in a lot of these big box stores around the country, and people will trample each other just to get those things. These are people right now who are fat, and if not happy, content, or, well, at least fat. All right, we'll say that. But they're willing to go to the ends of the earth to beat someone else up and get that $10 toaster or whatever, gizmo they think that they need or that they don't need, but they would just like to have around the house. And the first time I ever saw this video, I was just absolutely floored. Since then, John Smith, I believe, is the person behind these videos, has published multiple more videos as follow-ups. There's like 10 of these now that exist. But this one was originally done, it was right after Black Friday, that is the day after Thanksgiving 5 years ago. And he says, think about that for a moment. What's going to happen? Back in the day, there was a time when most of America happened to be living on a farm and could pretty much, yes, there were lean years and there were bad times, but you were pretty much protected from a lot of the things that happen, panics and shocks. That's what they call depressions and recessions. They called those panics way back then. But over the years, we have seen fewer and fewer Americans farming. Farming has gotten so high-tech. Farming can now rely on a lot less labor, so a lot more people are no longer on the farm, and they're working at other various places, service industries, not many factories left, of course, either. But if you think about that, in your day-to-day survival, you go to the grocery store likely a few times a week. What if the shelves were suddenly bare for an extended period? Doesn't even have to be that long, 2 weeks or a month. What are you going to do? I mean, this is the question that a lot of us probably never like to face, but it's a serious question. And as the caller pointed out, there was no electricity. What do you do then? What if you have a full freezer, but all of a sudden the electric goes off and you can't keep things cold? Well, if it's a cold winter day, maybe you can stack them outside, but then if the neighbors are hungry, you're going to be sharing whether you intended to or not. And maybe you feel you should share. But what if you go to share and that guy coming down the street and he's got a shotgun, he's not interested in sharing, he wants to take everything you have because he's got 8 hungry kids at home. This you don't realize it, but it wouldn't take a whole lot. We've talked before about the electronic pulse weapon that would be someone could detonate over a particular part of America and really knock down a great swath of the electrical grid, perhaps for up to 2 years. And we would be living in an almost Stone Age type of culture within a matter of a few days as we run out of other things and people's generators eventually run out, because even a generator is going to need generally a gasoline supply to keep going. Well, if the gasoline trucks aren't coming any longer. So, if you don't have any access to haven't canned or jarred vegetables on your own, and you don't have a huge area where you can store them and store them secretly, and you don't have some weapons to defend those stores against someone who might come and want them, it will be survival of the fittest. But if you've never seen this video, again, I highly recommend it. It's called The Madness of a Lost Society. You take a look at that, and that will send a chill down your spine with a scenario that this guy actually outlines. And yeah, it could happen. I don't think anybody out there is really that delusional to think that every time you turn that sink on, it's always going to happen, especially in a crisis. 8:51, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 37, 10 minutes away, almost 9 minutes away from 9 o'clock. This morning driving into work, I was listening to Coast, and George Norrie was talking about he sells survivalist gear. You've got a great many of the syndicated talk show hosts who do. And Norrie was explaining, though, that he made the mistake of making all of his mashed potatoes at once, and he has enough mashed potatoes to serve 5 dozen people. So you'd have to be a little judicious with that. And there are trustworthy places where you can go find these things. But I used to attend meetings of a Patriot Society several years ago where they told us how you could simply do a lot of this without having to go online, and because you can't always trust everyone out there who's selling you whatever so-called gear and food and things that they would like to sell you. So they would teach us how we could purify water on our own. You would take a 2-liter bottle, emptied, of course, after you finished the Coca-Cola or whatever it was you were drinking out of it, rinse it out, and then they taught us how you could store water in there for months on end, and what you would have to do, just a couple of, teaspoons or drops of whatever you would have to put in there to purify it. These were great lessons, and I think that most people out there, if you go online, you may be actually able to find some of this on a YouTube video too, and it could save you a lot of time and a lot of money. We have another caller with us. You're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley, our Top Story.
Yeah, Bill, there are lots of books out there that talk about this subject. Rawls has got the Patriot series, and 1 Second After is a good one, talks about a nuclear apocalypse. I'm currently reading a series called My Journal by A.H. Trimble. The writing's not super great, but it gets the message across.
Well, the first thing you'll see is the old folks, unfortunately, in that situation, and this is not meant as a recommendation, but the people who are living in a lot of those institutions, those nursing homes, they won't last long.
Right, those people, and then those people who are dependent on pharmaceuticals, diabetics will go very, very quickly because their medicine requires refrigeration. So, yeah, there's a lot of things to think about for this situation that you're discussing.
Yeah, and I thank you much for the telephone call. I've been doing some reading on this, and it is said that the best place to live, if this happens, certainly a big city will not be that place. So the other and living necessarily all on your own, out on a ranch, way out on the country, is not necessarily the best situation. In fact, the best situation is described as a community of somewhere around 2,500 to 3,500 people. where you can pretty much set up your own defense perimeter and you can work with your neighbors and you have a central meeting area. That can be the school, that could be the firehouse, and you can look out for each other in those smaller groups like that. So you take a community the size of Kimberly, that would be ideal because you know entrance and exit and the like. You could have just a handful of people, keeping an eye on things at the edge of town. But if you're one of those people who's looking for something, you're in the Great Depression. It was common. People would be coming up looking for work, and they'd be going to towns in California, and there would be guys out on the end of town, basically with rifles, shotguns, and the like, and saying, "Hey, keep moving. We don't have anything, and we can't afford to share any longer." So there would be, and that was just an economic disaster. There was still plenty of food around and the like, but people they were struggling and they didn't have the money always to buy it. 854, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Meat storage, there probably are ways to get around this. I mean, you can cure certain meats and the like that, you don't have to worry about necessarily freezing them if you do it the right way. Speaking of that, I'd like to tell you about our friends at High Desert Meat Processing, where they process one animal at a time. In fact, what you bring in is exactly what you'll get back. Darren Van Horn, the owner of High Desert Meat Processing in Twin Falls, he's got more than 30 years' experience in the meat business. You can visit High Desert Meat Processing on Facebook and read reviews of other customers, or give High Desert Meat Processing a telephone call for all of your wild game and as well as your domestic processing needs. The number is 734-9949. High Desert Meat does in-house smoking. Nothing gets shipped out. Specialty meats such as jerky, pepperoni, salami, summer sausage, kielbasa, brats, hot dogs, much more. USDA approved. Darren works closely with local beef growers on their programs to ensure quality meat. 734-9949. You're up next. You're on the air on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com.
Good morning, Bill. And back to High Desert Meats, best salami ever. So, there's an author out there by the name of Stephen Colley with 2 Ks. He's written, the very first book he wrote was called The Jakarta Pandemic, and it really went into depth on what would happen if there was a pandemic, like the flu or something like that. And then he went on to write several novels along the lines of a electromagnetic pulse destroying the grid, and it all takes place up and down the eastern seaboard around Boston and Connecticut, up that direction. But he's a retired Navy SEAL. He's also teamed up with another gentleman to write basically a prepper book on how to store foods. But the books go into very detailed areas on what he did to the protagonist to prepare his family for certain things like this. And I mean, even though they're based in science fiction, the tools and everything that they used were very much appropriate for today.
There used to be a family that I knew of. They were members of what was called the Catholic Identity Movement. This sprang up in the early 1960s, and they had no electricity at their home. They had a well for water, but they grew most of what they needed, and they had some of the most unique ways of storing food. For instance, they would take bushels of apples, and they would literally dig a hole in the ground, put the bushel in there, but then they would cover it up with burlap or something like that, and then fill dirt over it. And do you know that they could preserve apples that way through good parts of the winter? And that was a complete shock to me. But these are things that our ancestors knew about not all that long ago, in fact. Most of us, though, we have no knowledge or idea how we would do anything like that.
Well, all you need to really do is study the Amish, how they store their food, and we can learn a lot of lessons.
The Amish don't know that there are depressions or recessions and the like. Having grown up in a community that was about 1/3 Amish, I know that, and they were pretty much immune to all of the other things that were happening to the rest of us when there'd be an economic downturn or a bad storm or things of that nature. You know what? There are people out there that they know what they're doing, obviously. I thank you much for the telephone call, sir. 9 o'clock news is coming up. Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Couple of things I want to get to in the next hour if we have a chance. Number one, Republican political field, that is the ones running for president, are split when it comes to issues on illegal immigration. We want to talk about that in the next hour if we get a chance. Also, Common Core under fire, and the very first state that ever adopted Common Core, they're now talking about scrapping it, and you won't believe where the opposition is coming from. It's 8:59. Bill Colley with you, as I mentioned. 39 on our way to a high temperature today of, I don't know, pretty much the same old, same old.